The Valley of the Queens. Before us is the mortuary palace of Queen Hatshepsut, the first great woman in history. The terraced palace was laden with fragrant woods, carved ivory, and rare metals, mainly brought from the land of Punt in tropical Africa. An ancient inscription reads, "Never was brought the like of this for any king who has been since the beginning." We see that even time has not diminished entirely the interior splendor of Queen Hatshepsut's palace. Behind the magnificent palace facade, recessed in the somber cliff, which rises above it like a sentry, were the burial chambers of this efficient and powerful queen. On the top of the cliff stretches the desert plateau from which descended the first Nile Valley settlers. Constant irrigation is necessary to push back the ever-encroaching desert. Rameses II, famed as a builder, erected this sanctuary, popularly known as the Ramesseum, for his funerary rites. Before it stood colossal statues of himself, weighing over 1,000 tons. Egypt was dotted with enormous edifices owing their origin to this pharaoh. Little villages stand upon ground once hallowed by great temples and palaces. This temple of Medinet Habu is an excellent example of pure Egyptian architecture. Medinet Habu was a fortress temple. Originally, a girdle wall, 60 feet in height, enclosed it. From the top of one of the huge crenellated towers, we gazed down into the courtyard. The gateway is one of the most remarkable buildings in Egypt. The narrow stone stairs in these tower walls, by which the soldiers climbed to the top to defend them against invaders, still remain. The sculpturing on the outer walls depicts Rameses III as a formidable conqueror slaying his enemies. From the top of the pylon tower, we gaze down upon desert and fertile fields. This is the remains of a sacred lake. Here, ceremonies of purification were held over 30 centuries ago. The processional area through these huge portals is known as the pavilion. On these walls, inscribed in stone, the kings told of their achievements in peace and war. Fortunately, their vanity preserved their history. The colossal statues are of Rameses III. Wave after wave of conquests swept over Egypt, yet these remain to portray a mighty warrior king. Rameses III was not alone victorious in war, but in love as well. He maintained one of the largest harems, though in portraying a queen standing beside him, he made her but knee-high to show his superior status. Rameses III probably died as a result of a harem conspiracy. A representative of the Egyptian government who accompanied the Rosicrucian camera expedition points to the arched roof of a sanctuary. We now enter the sacred precincts of the temple. The walls are covered with paintings which still retain their original colors. The ancient artist who executed this work could little imagine the world of today from which come their present admirers. The stupendous workmanship of this complex of temples awes the modern visitor. Egyptian architecture evolved over centuries of time. Columns, such as this mammoth one, influenced the design of edifices of the Greek and Roman world. The Egyptians took nature as the model for much of their ornamentation. On walls adjoining temple portals, the Egyptians inscribed many solemn and fearful injunctions. Sometimes they were warnings of dire consequences to befall those who would dare deface the sacred places. Legends tell of the fate of those who violated these admonishments. the black granite figure of the lioness goddess Sekhmet, the silent guardian of a past glory. We depart Medinet Habu. Before us we see the sharp line of demarcation where vegetation ends and desert begins. This device is called a shaduf. It is a form of well sweep used to raise water from one level to another for irrigation. At one end of the sweep is a huge lump of dried mud that serves as a counterbalance to the bucket. We prepare to return to the east bank of the Nile. This gateway leads to the temple of Khonsu, the moon god. It is one of a series of temples known as Karnak. Here we see the winged sun disk with the entwined cobra, symbolic of the sun god Ra. It took 2,000 years to build Karnak. A succession of kings added temples and colonnaded halls or hypostyles over the centuries. The imposing edifices are spread over 600 acres. As the west of the Nile was the land of the dead, so this east side was of the living. The statue of Rameses II, who did little at Karnak other than set up statues of himself. This splendid avenue of ram-headed sphinxes leading up to the pylon belongs to the time of Amenhotep III of the 14th century before Christ. The avenue once led to Luxor Temple. The ram was worshipped as a procreative god. Here at Karnak, the ram was identified with the god Osiris, who in turn symbolized life and fertility. Designs of the columns indicate the period of their construction. This hypostyle is the greatest colonnaded hall ever erected by man. It is 338 feet wide and 179 feet deep. In this single hall, once radiant in brilliant colors, could be placed the Cathedral of Notre Dame of Paris. "100 men could be grouped on the top of one of these huge columns. The word Karnak literally means windows. Here we see one of the earliest of stone grilled windows in the nave or central elevated aisles. Less than 100 years ago, but a portion of these structures protruded above the accumulated sand. Let us go along to get a better view. One of the two great obelisks erected by Queen Hatshepsut. This is a single granite shaft, nearly 100 feet high. It weighs over 350 tons. Imagine the skill required to erect this. Obelisks, such as these, were often covered with electrum, a gold-silver alloy that must have shimmered in the brilliant sun of Egypt. Under the direction of Thutmose III, this statue of the god Amun-Ra was made. Until the finding of the Rosetta Stone during Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, hieroglyphic writing like this was undecipherable. These beautiful pillars stand before the sanctuary of the temple. They are decorated with plant emblems. The one on the left is the papyrus symbol of Lower Egypt. The one on the right is the lotus symbol of Upper Egypt. This girl is unimpressed by the grandeur and austerity of her surroundings as she knits before the shadows of the past. Candidates for initiation in the great mystery schools of Thebes were first obliged to descend to this ablution pool and bathe in a symbolical purification rite, for this was a holy water. Upon this sacred lake were held exalted initiations into the secret rites of the mystery schools. When the moon was high, the humble initiate was led down the steps onto a golden barge. His way was lighted by torches and soft strains of music greeted his ears. Priests and acolytes in symbolical regalia guided his way into the solemn mysteries of age-old wisdom. The Rosicrucian Order, a worldwide philosophical fraternity, through its camera expeditions, reveals the achievements and aspirations of our forebears. Our civilization today has an inheritance of cultural traditions which they established.